Across the Fence, we raise a glass to Vermont brewers as we gear up for Green Mountain Beer Week. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. When it comes to craft beers, Vermont is a national leader. Craft brewers around the state have won national and international beer-making awards, and that's making Vermont a must-see and taste destination. Vermont's craft brewers are hoping things will come to a head next week when Green Mountain Beer Week gets underway. To learn more, I'm joined by the Executive Director of the Vermont Brewers Association, Melissa Corbin, and alongside Melissa is Steve Parks. Steve is the brewmaster at Drop-In Brewing in Middlebury. Welcome to Across the Fence. Now, Melissa, tell us about the Vermont Brewers Association.
So the Vermont Brewers Association is 22 years old now, and we are focused on education and advocacy and marketing for the 51 craft brewers that we represent in the state.
And so how's the impact on your organization as craft beer has become more popular?
Well, we've grown now from sort of part-time contractors running the association to full-time staff. We have an established office in Burlington, and we really are more, as opposed to being sort of reactive in the past, we're very strategic with our focus, and we have a lot of intentional goals that we're working towards as an association. We have a very active board of directors that's working very hard, and lots of active committees that are working on initiatives throughout the year, which is really great.
Now, Steve, many people know the term microbrew. What's the difference between microbrew and craft beer?
I don't really think there is a difference between the two. Microbrew was a term that was used to describe the smaller independent breweries in the early days of the craft beer revolution, if you want to call it that. And it kind of defines the brewery by its size, whereas craft as a term for beer defines the breweries by their intention, what they're trying to make, the type of beers and the interesting flavors they're trying to create, as opposed to perhaps traditional beers in the United States that were relatively flavorless, but also, you know, just for drinking when you're thirsty. Craft beer is for drinking when you want to enjoy the flavor of beer.
Now, there was a microbeer boom and bust in Vermont in the 90s, so what's different this time?
Well, I think lessons learned. I think lots of new breweries started out in the 90s. At that time, you really need to be a certain size. There was a certain capital investment required to build equipment to make beer, and the market was a little harder. It was more difficult to find places to sell beer. Very competitive, but not necessarily because there was lots of craft beer around, but because the larger breweries had the distribution and the shelf space in the stores. Right now, though, we're a much more open market. A new brewer starting up can do it with a lot less capital investment, and the market's ready. The customers want what they produce. Far greater numbers than they used to.
Well, Vermont's relatively short growing season makes it a challenge to raise crops that are used in brewing, but that hasn't stopped Vermonters from trying and succeeding. Across the Fence's Keith Silva visited a Vermont business that's got brewmasters and beer drinkers going local.
What's going on in this barn hasn't happened in Vermont for over 150 years.
I am Vermont's maltster, yes, with an S.
At Petersons Quality Malt in Moncton, the ancient process of malting starts with a canoe paddle, a couple of converted maple sap tanks, and a lot of passion.
It goes back about 11,000 years. This is a very simple process, but complicated at the same time. I'm taking cereal grains and I'm converting the starches into sugars that can be used in brewing and distilling. You can malt any kind of cereal grain. So that's whether it be wheat, barley, rye, the three most common ones. It's a fairly simple three-step process. You're going to soak the grain, then you're going to let it germinate, and then you're going to kiln it.
Drying the grain in the kiln locks the sugars in place. Mill it, add water, yeast, maybe some hops, allow it to ferment, and you've got beer. Vermont is first in the nation for breweries and brew pubs per capita. Peterson considers his business craft malt, which means, like the state's craft brewing industry, it's robust but small.
At this point, we probably have about 10 regular customers. Most of our brewers are within 25 miles. The larger breweries couldn't use us. We don't have enough supply for them to do that realistically. So mostly we're working with smaller craft breweries and brew pubs. My estimation is that of the beer that's made in Vermont, and that stays in Vermont, so that eliminate the stuff that goes out of state. That probably uses roughly about 22 million pounds a year. And when we're going full capacity, we can do about 200 tons. So roughly 2%.
What Petersons' business lacks in size, it makes up for in flexibility, creativity, and uniqueness.
We have them in a 500-liter.
All distinctions Master Brewer Todd Hare looks for in the beer he brews at Foam in Burlington.
We're probably using right now around 60-75% of our base malt bill comes from Andrew Peterson, and that's a Pilsner. We use a lot of his wheat as well, but we find that malt is fantastic for the beers that we're doing. It just contributes a really nice flavor in the end of the beer and so forth, but definitely unique.
I like the idea of driving the industry with a better product. I want to taste a better beer. How do you get there? And with beer, it's somewhat limiting. I mean, sure, you can throw in some puree of something or other, but you can't have beer without malt. And how do you make a better malt? How do you get a better flavor out of it? And that's sort of what's driving us at this point. It's like, what can we do in every batch to get the most extract out of it, to give the brewers something truly different that they haven't had before?
All the grain Peterson malts is grown in Vermont. Finding grain in an agricultural landscape dominated by corn and hay is challenging, which is why Peterson contacted UVM Extension.
UVM Extension was one of the first places I reached out to. I was familiar with the grain trials they were doing up in Aalborg, and talked to Heather and Erica there. They've been invaluable.
We've been working with Andrew for many years. We've provided him with lots of valuable connections, both in the farming community, in the brewing community, and with other craft maltsters throughout the Northeast. And now helping farmers grow barley so that he has product to use in his business. A really important part of Extension is bringing people together. Creating networks and creating opportunities for people to meet each other and learn from other people, not just from us.
The research they've been doing is stuff that I'm looking at every year, determining what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it. They have introduced me to most of the grain growers in the state, which they're very many, but they know all of them well. They also have a testing lab now, so they're able to do malt quality testing, which is, again, I couldn't tell a brewer that what my barley's got without them. So here you actually have an academic wing that is legitimizing what we're doing, which is fantastic.
If the trend holds, craft brewing will continue to increase in Vermont. Its success will depend on the product and the consumer.
I think most craft beer consumers aren't thinking about the ingredients in their beer. I don't think that's wrong. It's just never been a conversation we've had before. The Vermont brewers are just an outstanding group, and they've put Vermont on the map so that tourists are driving here to get their beer. For me to play a part in that is phenomenal for me. That was my dream, to be part of the Vermont brewing world, and watching these guys produce, and then being able to use something local that came from the hard work that we're putting in is incredibly rewarding.
Peterson's quality malt is a one-of-a-kind Vermont business, and with any luck, it won't stay that way for long. In Moncton, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Well, thanks, Keith. I'm talking with Melissa Corbin of the Vermont Brewers Association and Steve Parks, brewmaster at Drop-In Brewing in Middlebury. Steve, what's it going to take to get brewers to use more local ingredients, do you think?
I think quality, getting the quality up there where brewers need it to be. It looks like we're making a great start with some locally produced grain there. But brewers in Vermont, the market has developed to a sophisticated level from where it was when I first started brewing in 1988 in Maryland. We can get the best malt from anywhere in the world now at relatively reasonable prices. I use malt from Germany that's among the best in the world, and it costs me twice as much as domestic malt, but it's still cheaper than I'd be buying from down the from stuff that's made down the road. And as a brewer, I really need to be confident that the quality of the raw materials there. And I'm excited to get around to trying something that's produced locally. And to be honest, when you're paying a lot more for your materials, and then there's got to be a reason for that. And selling your product as containing local malt is a huge value added. Same with hops. Hops grown in Vermont would have exactly the same thing.
Now, Melissa, in our story, Andrew mentioned beer drinkers don't really think about where their ingredients, their beers are coming from, but do you think they should?
I think they should. The challenge, Judy, is that, as you heard Andrew say in that segment, is that they're just not producing enough. I mean, as much hops and malt that is being produced in Vermont, Vermont brewers are using everything that's being produced here, but they do need to go out of state and they do need to go out of country, as Steve mentioned, in order to get the ingredients that they need to meet the production demands that we have here in Vermont, because our beer is so popular.
Well, speaking of production demands, Steve, do you see craft beer industry slowing down anytime soon?
I don't think so. I think I have a lot of confidence in the future for craft beer growth. The main reason for that being that once you try and enjoy something with flavor, with taste and sophisticated product, it's very difficult to go back to something basic. And I think that's just human nature. We're always going to continue to grow as a segment of the market. We face competition in terms of larger breweries realizing that the public wants something that tastes good as much as they want something that to swill down with a slice of pizza. But I think once you see that people are going to continue to enjoy flavor, I don't think there's any way we're going to go back.
With so many styles and varieties of craft beer available, do you think that people get confused at all? Melissa, is that something that you face as an organization?
I don't think it's confusion as much as an opportunity for education, because there are so many different styles, and we as an industry are very focused on descriptions. For example, when you go to Drop-In Brewery, there is, Steve has a booklet of a page-long description for each one of the styles of beers that he produces, and people take the time to read that and educate themselves before they're choosing which beer they want. So I think it's less about confusion and more about an opportunity for education.
Yeah, I agree. The fact that so many of the small breweries in Vermont have tasting rooms where we can directly interact with the customers that come in. We talk to the customers about beer, and it's an education opportunity.
And people love that.
I think so.
It seems so.
From our experience, but but also I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing for people to have lots of choices.
Now, craft beer is more expensive than some national brands, and there's a degree of exclusivity. What's the goal of craft brewing, do you think?
The goal, we want our neighbors to make a living. So yes, it should be more expensive than a commodity product made in a massive factory in some other part of the country. Yeah, we're supporting our friends and neighbors. That's part of the Vermont ideal anyway, and I think that's why craft brewing fits in so well with that. We're artisans. We make an artistic product. We add value to ingredients by our skill and our passion, and I think that deserves to be paid for.
Okay, Green Mountain Beer Week kicks off next Monday, May 15th. What are some of the events that the breweries are planning, Melissa?
Well, this is our first year being part of the American Craft Beer Week, which takes part across the country, and we actually have 40 events that are happening during that week statewide, which we are really excited about. We have everything from 100% Vermont beer tap takeovers. We have beer and cheese pairings, educational events. The Kingdom Brewing and Lawson's Finest Liquids are doing an event educating people about sap beer and the history of that. So there are all kinds of things happening all over the state, and we have a dedicated section of our website, the events section of our website, that's highlighting all of those. So we encourage people to go out and visit new places, try new things, and educate themselves about Vermont craft beer.
And where can people get tickets?
So there is information on our website and hyperlinks to Eventbrite so that people can get tickets there. And I would also like to mention that today at 4 o'clock, there is a sale for our annual fundraiser, which is our Waterfront Festival, July 21st and 22nd in Burlington. And we will have 46 brewers with us this year from Vermont and a couple of guest brewers from Canada, Massachusetts, and Maine. So we're really excited about it. So get your tickets today at 4 o'clock.
Terrific. Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today. That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.